Hi, thanks for joining. It's Patty from PS Paper Crafts, and today I'm going to show you how to make this really pretty card. I'm hoping you can see the deer and the wolf in the background with the bunny rabbit, and they're gathering together. So I did some embossing, dry embossing, and then I put some snow on the trees, and I stamped on my embossing folder to get these images. So a couple of different techniques here. I wanted to just tell you about this stamp set. So this is in the 2019 holiday catalog, and it's a special set. It's at the very last page. And for every stamp set that they sell, they'll send $3 to mental health organizations. So it's a nice, beautiful stamp set, and it's a really good cause. So I'm really happy that Stamping Up is doing that. They do a lot of things like that, and I really am proud to be part of their organization, actually. So anyway, let's get started with the card. I'm using this woodland textured embossing folder. And I actually did one a while back with motorcycles, and I used Stays On ink, and I can't get it off. But it doesn't affect the embossing, it's just sitting there. And then you want to make sure the Sizzix is forward where we're going to stamp, and you want to make sure your trees are not upside down. So you wouldn't want to do it this way and have your trees upside down. So just be aware of those things. So you want to stamp on this side, and I tried to stamp as much as I could where it was more solid. So you'll see there between the trees as opposed to, right smack in the middle of them, because the ink is going to adhere more to this area. I hope that makes sense. So the first thing we're going to do is get our piece of Sahara Stand cardstock. I have all my pieces over here. And we're going to stamp right on this. And don't worry, you can wipe it off. I'm using, unless you use Stays On, I guess you need the Stays On cleaner, which I don't have. I'm using Early Espresso, and you just kind of have to be careful with this when you're doing it. So I'm going to get the deer and ink up the deer, nice and inky. And I'm going to put it kind of in that area. So let me just, I'm trying to figure out how to hold it so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to try to get his head in that area and press down. So you'll see the deer, he's kind of in the woods. And then I'm going to take this beautiful wolf and do the same thing, only over here. Just want to make sure I'm not touching that. Okay, so you can see it. Hopefully you can see it slightly. I'm going to just close this up, and before I put this on, I'm just going to get my Big Shot, because I don't want to mess it up. I want to make sure I'm ready to go once I lay it down. So what I'm going to do is take it and hold it on this side. You don't want to swish that ink around, and kind of let's see, how did I do this? Kind of see where you want it. So you're gonna kind of move it around and see where you want it. I don't want it all the way at the bottom, because I'm going to put that little snow hill there, and I think that looks good. So I'm going to just press it down here, and you try not to move it, because you don't want to smudge the ink. And then you'll put your top piece on and run it through. This is one of the older embossing folders, so it doesn't need the new embossing plate. It's just the two plastic plates, just like you've always done it. So now you're going to see this image, and isn't that neat? So I love how that came out, and then I'll just wipe this off and clean it off. No big deal. Comes right off. So that piece is done. The next step I did was to get the snow on the trees. You could leave it like this, or you could just put some ink on it if you wanted to just highlight the top part. But I wanted to do the snow, and I wanted to show you how I did that. So I'm going to get my all my embossing stuff out. So I'm going to use my Versamark. I have some paint brushes just to wipe them off, and I'm going to just rub my embossing buddy over it, and I want to get in between the trees a little bit. I don't want the embossing powder on there. And they almost look like birch trees. I was trying to get a snow effect. And then I'm going to take my Versamark ink, or Versamark stamp pad. It's a watermark stamp pad. I always call it an ink pad. And I'm just going to slightly run it over the top. I don't want to get in between the trees. I just want to get the outer part. And you can brush off if you get it somewhere you don't want it. You can brush it off before you heat it up. So let's see how this worked out. And this is kind of a trial and error. I've had a couple of trials before I actually got it to work right. So I'm just going to put my embossing powder right over this. And you see it did come between, but we'll get rid of that. And I'm okay if it gets a little bit off the trees because it's snow, right? So you'll see it's in a lot of places. So what I did was I just took my paintbrush and wiped it off. And it comes off pretty easy. And then it won't melt where it doesn't sit. This is going to be covered as well by the snowbank that the bunny rabbit's on. See, so it got on my deer. Just get it off him. And this just takes a little bit of patience. Just go down it, get it done. I like to flick it a little bit. Just get that little part of the wolf off. So I think that's pretty good. Good enough for me. And let's put the top on the powder and put all this stuff away. Okay, now I'm going to get my heat tool out. I'm just going to heat it up, and you'll see that it melts. And excuse the sound. I'm just looking at it. I see a little bit of areas that I want to clean up a little bit more. So you do it as much or as little as you want. Okay, so I'm going to start this, and then I'm going to speed it up so you don't have to listen to this sound. And you just want to make sure it's all shiny and you don't have any powder in any places that didn't melt. So if you look at it on the side, sometimes you can see. I think that's okay. All right, looks good to me. So now we have these done, the dry embossing and the heat embossing. Let's pull out our card again, and let's get our card pieces. Actually, I got powder on this card. Sometimes I end up with powder everywhere, and I take one of those cloths and wipe it off. One of these things. And I just kind of wipe around, make sure I get it off my other cards. Because it does make a mess sometimes. Okay, good enough. So now what we're going to do is get our bunny hill. What I did was I took this from In the Woods and I just cut out a piece. You could hand cut it. You don't need this. If you have it, use it. Or look at your dies and see what you have that might work. That's what I do. I just keep my dies on these magnets and I spin through them and find things that work for different cards. So here's my little hill, and it's about 2 inches high. And if you, what I did before, it's hard to know where to stamp these, so if it's too high, you just pull it down, and then you can cut it off on top so that you can have the right size. And I'm going to stop and do that actually. But let me get the bunny stamped and then the sentiment. So the bunny is stamped in Early Espresso. And I think he's really cute, and if you wanted to color him in, you could. And then I have Gather Together, so I thought this was a perfect sentiment for this card where the animals are gathering together. And this is from one of the new stamp sets called Gather Together. And then I'm using this May the Season Bring You Smiles and Love That Will Last All Year. So I did that on the inside with the bunny. So let's get that done while we have our ink out. And just want to make sure I was still in frame here, and get the bunny again. He's a cute little bunny. And we'll just put him on the bottom. Okay, so our stamping is done. Let's get this away. And now we just have to put things together. So what I like to do when I have this type of embossed is to use liquid glue or tear and tape or something a little bit stronger that you're going to be able to hold down, because it's not a flat surface. So I like the liquid glue because it really gets into kind of the highs and the lows of your layer. So we'll put that down. Oh, and I didn't cut it. Let me just stop this and cut it, and I will be right back. So I'm back. So what I did was I cut about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch off the top. So that gives me a little more height. Let me make sure I have enough adhesive up here now. A little more height before I put the bunny hill down. Okay. Here's some snow on the deer and some snow on the wolf, which I think is okay. And then I'm also going to use some liquid glue. You can use anything here, but I think the liquid glue, because we're going over the embossed layer. And you just want to make sure that your border is around evenly. Okay, let's put this down, and then we'll pop it up. And then I'll show you how I did the moon, or the sun, whatever you want to call it. Okay, and we'll pop that up with dimensionals, but let me just show you how I did this other piece. What I did was I got a little piece of Daffodil Delight, and before I punched it, I used some Calypso Coral, and I just sponged it, and I just went kind of around in circles. I should probably have a piece of scrap under here. And you could make it as dark or as light as you want. I wanted to give it, you know, kind of a muted, soft look. So I did that, and then I took my 1-inch punch, figured out where I liked it in there, punched it out, and now I've got the sun or the moon. Whatever you want to do, call it. Okay, so now let's get our dimensionals out and put these guys down. It's an easy card to make, and it's kind of fun to play around with your your embossing folders so that you can stamp right on them. You just have to be careful that you don't smudge it when you feed it through. And let's put one on this guy. And we'll put that right up there. And then we'll put our inside in, and we're all done. Not too bad, right? I love the fall season. I love the colors, and I love the animals, nature. When I lived in New York, I had deer and bear and rabbits all around my house. I loved it. I used to see a baby deer every spring. I would see the mom and the baby just learning how to walk in the same area. I think they just lived in my yard, and I would see them out my kitchen window every year. So I missed that in Florida. There's deer down here, but it's not the same, not where I live. So anyway, thanks for joining me. I hope you try this and let me see what your cards look like. You take care. Bye.